After my parents passed away, I inherited their beautiful mansion, a grand estate valued at $135 million. This house wasn't just a piece of property to me. It was filled with memories, a place where I'd grown up surrounded by warmth and laughter. My husband, Leaf, and I decided to move in, hoping this would be the perfect place to start a family and make new memories of our own. Leaf was 35, a reliable software developer, and together we imagined a future here. I dreamed of decorating the rooms, painting the walls, and one day hearing the sounds of children filling the halls. It felt like everything was falling into place, like I was living a dream. But that dream soon became a nightmare. Leaf's family had always seemed interested in my inheritance. At first, I brushed it off, thinking they were simply happy for us. I believed family was about sharing, and I was willing to help them when needed. But their interest quickly turned into something more troubling, something darker. One quiet afternoon, I was working on some sketches in the living room when loud, angry voices shattered the calm. I looked up to see Leaf's mother, Leora, storming in with my sister-in-law, Zariel, and brother-in-law, Dorian. They hadn't called, hadn't given any warning. They just barged in, their faces tense and cold. "Kaylin, we need to talk," Leora announced sharply, her voice leaving no room for argument. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling a sudden wave of anxiety. "We have some documents you need to see," Zariel sneered, handing me a stack of papers with a twisted smile. I took them with a growing sense of dread. As I scanned the documents, my heart sank. They were fake, but made to look like legal papers, claiming ownership of my home. My hands shook as I looked up, struggling to find the right words. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "You can't just say this house is yours." "Oh, but we can," Dorian replied smugly, crossing his arms. "According to these papers, this mansion belongs to Leaf's family now. You need to move out." I turned to Leaf, hoping he would defend me, hoping he'd say it was a misunderstanding. But he stood there, his arms crossed, his face completely blank. It was as if he was a stranger. "Leaf, please say something," I pleaded, feeling my heart break as he looked away unmoved. "Kaylin, this is for the best," Leora said, her voice dripping with a fake sympathy. "You'll be happier if we take charge. You don't need this heavy burden." A wave of anger surged through me. "This is my home," I shouted. "I'm not leaving. I won't let you take this from me." Leora's face twisted with rage. Suddenly, she stepped forward and slapped me hard across the face. I stumbled back, stunned, barely processing what had happened. My cheek stung, but it was nothing compared to the pain of betrayal coursing through me. "Are you just going to let her talk to us like this?" Zariel snapped at Leaf, her face full of contempt. Emboldened by Leora's aggression, Dorian began grabbing my things, my sketches, my personal belongings, and throwing them out the door. "You heard Mom. Get out," he yelled, his voice filled with cold satisfaction. I stood there, helpless, watching as they tossed my life out onto the street. My dreams, my plans, all of it was being ripped away. "Leaf," I cried out, hoping he'd come to his senses, but he remained silent, unmoved by my pain. As I stood outside, clutching a few of my scattered belongings, I felt shattered. But a spark inside me refused to die. They had taken everything from me, but they hadn't broken me. I decided then and there that I would fight back. I would make sure they regretted this day. This is my story, a tale of betrayal, resilience, and the journey to reclaim everything I lost. As the confrontation escalated, Leaf stood frozen, as if paralyzed by his family's aggression. His silence hurt more than any of the harsh words or forceful actions I was facing. My anger and heartbreak blended into a bitter realization. He wasn't going to defend me. He was siding with them. "Enough," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Get out of my house. You have no right to do this." My words echoed in the room, but they only seemed to fuel their determination. Leora stepped closer, her gaze piercing, her presence filling the room with an oppressive tension. "You think you can keep all of this for yourself?" she hissed. "This belongs to us now. You're just a guest in your own house. The weight of her words hit me hard. This home, filled with memories and love, was slipping through my fingers. I could feel the walls closing in, the air growing heavier as I struggled to breathe. The realization that I might lose everything, my home, my dreams, and even my husband, was unbearable. Finally, Leaf spoke, his voice barely audible, lacking any strength. Kaylin, this isn't worth it. Let's just talk about this later. Talk about what? I snapped, feeling my voice rise with frustration and hurt. You're letting them bully me out of my own home. The betrayal was like a wave crashing over me. My whole life felt like it was unraveling. Leora suddenly grabbed my arm, her grip rough. I jerked away, fury blazing within me. Don't you dare touch me, I shouted, feeling the weight of their greed pressing down on me. In that moment, I knew I had to stand my ground. They were trying to take everything from me, but I wasn't going to let it happen without a fight. You will not take this house from me, I declared, my voice filled with defiance. I won't go quietly. Dorian let out a cold, mocking laugh. You think you can fight us? You're all alone here, Kaylin. Leaf is with us. Tears stung my eyes, but they were tears of frustration, not defeat. I looked around at the mess they had created, my scattered belongings, my memories strewn about like they meant nothing. But I wasn't ready to give up. I'm not alone, I said, my voice steady and resolute. I have the law on my side. You can't just barge in here and take what doesn't belong to you. For the first time, Leora's confident smirk faltered. She stepped back, unsure, and her domineering presence seemed to waver. You really think you can do this? She scoffed. You'll regret this, Kaylin. But I felt a spark ignite inside me, a fire that told me I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my identity, my dignity, and my future. This was the start of a battle I couldn't back down from, no matter how long or difficult it would be. The days that followed blurred together, filled with tension and fear. I wandered through the mansion, feeling the walls that once held laughter and warmth now suffocating me with memories of better times. Leaf remained distant, retreating deeper into himself, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. Each time I tried to talk to him, to reach out for support, he brushed me off, saying he needed time to think. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, staring at the remnants of the life I'd worked so hard to build, I knew I couldn't wait for Leaf's support. The thought of losing my home, my sanctuary, was too much to bear. If I didn't act now, I risked losing everything. I picked up my phone and dialed a lawyer. When he answered, I took a deep breath and said, "Hello, this is Kaylin. I need help with a property issue." My voice shook slightly, but I steadied myself, determined to push through. The lawyer, Mr. Evander, listened carefully as I explained the situation. He was calm and assured, a quiet strength in his voice that I found reassuring. "Kaylin, it sounds like you have a strong case," he said. "Start gathering all the documents you have, the will, property deeds, anything that shows your ownership. We'll need to act fast to prevent them from trying to take over permanently." With newfound determination, I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. I collected my parents' will, the property deeds, and any other documents proving my rightful ownership. I also detailed the confrontation, recording each word, each threat, every detail that could strengthen my case. Each document, each piece of evidence, felt like a shield I was building, preparing myself for the battle that lay ahead. In my heart, I knew this was just the beginning. But I also knew I was ready to fight when I met with Mr. Evander again. He calmly reassured me, "We can file for a restraining order against them to prevent any further harassment. It's essential to establish your legal rights to the property." His confidence gave me strength, and feeling empowered, I agreed to move forward. Later that evening, I returned home to find Leaf sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. "Leaf, we need to talk," I said softly but firmly. "I'm taking legal action against your family." He looked up, his eyes widening in shock. "Kaylin, don't do this. It'll only make things worse. They're trying to take my home, Leaf." I can't just sit back and let that happen, I replied, my frustration surfacing. He shook his head, looking away.
You don't understand.
My mother, she's not someone you want to cross. She'll make your life miserable. She already has, I said, my heart racing with a mix of anger and pain. This is my life, Leaf. You should be on my side. He stood abruptly, running his hands through his hair in agitation. I just need time to think. You're pushing me away. A deep sense of betrayal washed over me as I watched him struggle. I felt alone, truly alone, in this fight. I can't wait any longer. I have to stand up for myself, I said, my voice quiet but resolute. Leaf turned and walked away, leaving me feeling a painful mix of defeat and resolve. In that moment, something shifted within me. Instead of despair, I felt a flicker of resilience. I had to be my own advocate because no one else would fight for my rights. The following week, I filed for a restraining order against Leora, Zariel, and Dorian. A court date was set, and I spent hours preparing my case, going over my notes, and mentally bracing myself for the days ahead. I knew this hearing would be a pivotal moment in my life. On the day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse, my heart pounding in my chest. Dressed in my best suit, I hoped to project the confidence I didn't fully feel. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Leaf sitting with his family, their faces a mix of anger and contempt. I took a steadying breath, walked to my side of the courtroom, and felt the weight of my decision pressing on me. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. I stood up and presented my case, detailing the invasion of my home and the threats that had been made against me. After I finished speaking, I glanced over at Leaf, searching his face for even a flicker of support, but he remained stone-faced, a wall of indifference. That sight only strengthened my resolve. This battle was no longer just about a house. It was about my dignity, my identity, and taking control of my life. When the judge ruled in my favor and granted the restraining order, a wave of relief washed over me. I had taken a stand, and it felt powerful. As I left the courthouse, I realized that I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. I was ready to fight for my home, my life, and my future. Despite the victory, I knew this was only the beginning. I would still have to face Leaf and his family, who wouldn't take this ruling lightly. The tension at home was palpable, with Leaf avoiding me more than ever. He seemed lost, torn between his loyalty to his family and to me. It hurt to see him so distant, but I had resolved to stand my ground. One evening, as I sat alone, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and I cautiously looked through the peephole. It was Leaf, looking disheveled and anxious. I opened the door, keeping my voice steady as I asked, "Leaf, what do you want?" He stepped inside, glancing around nervously. "We need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "About what?" "Your family's latest scheme," I replied, crossing my arms. "Kaylin, I'm trying to understand what's going on," he said, his eyes pleading. "My mom is furious. She said she'll do whatever it takes to get this house." I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my composure. "Leaf, this is my home. I'm not going to let them take it from me. I need you to understand that." He looked down, his expression conflicted. I could see the tension weighing on him, but I wasn't sure if he'd ever stand by my side. This battle was changing everything between us, and deep down, I was beginning to see that I might truly be fighting this war alone. In that moment, I knew I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. I was prepared for the road ahead, knowing it would be long and painful. But I also felt a newfound strength, a determination that told me I was ready to reclaim my life. "No matter the cost, you need to stand with me, not them," I said, my voice breaking with frustration and hurt. Leaf looked down, his voice trembling as he admitted, "I don't know if I can do that. You don't know what she's capable of." "Then why did you marry me?" I shot back, anger bubbling up inside me. "I thought we were a team. I thought you loved me." He hung his head, visibly torn. "I do love you, Kaylin. But family is everything to me. I can't just turn my back on them." A sharp pang of betrayal struck me. "So, You'll choose them over me? After everything that's happened? I asked, my heart breaking as I waited for his response. Before he could say another word, a loud crash outside broke the tense silence. We rushed to the window and saw Leora, Zariel, and Dorian standing on the front lawn, angrily arguing with a group of movers. My heart sank as I realized they were trying to bring their things into my home, ignoring the restraining order completely. Leaf, they're breaking the law, I shouted, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. We need to call the police. No, don't do that, he replied quickly, his voice tinged with panic. It'll only make things worse. Worse than this, I demanded, unable to believe what I was hearing. They're trying to take over my house. As I reached for my phone, Leaf grabbed my arm, his grip firm, yet desperate. Please, Kaylin, just give me a moment to talk to them. I hesitated, torn between wanting to let Leaf handle it and the urge to finally put an end to this nightmare. But I was done waiting. No more talking, Leaf. This ends now. With a steady hand, I dialed 911, my heart pounding as I explained the situation to the operator. They assured me that help was on the way. As I hung up, I looked outside to see Leaf's family still arguing with the movers, their faces red with anger and determination. I stepped out onto the porch, feeling a surge of adrenaline as I shouted, "You are not welcome here."
Get off my property.
Leora turned, her eyes blazing with fury. You think you can just kick us out? This is our home too, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. Just then, the sound of sirens filled the air, and a strange mix of relief and apprehension washed over me. I was finally taking a stand, but the tension was thick, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation could escalate. When the police arrived, I stepped forward, ready to explain everything. Leaf remained silent, standing off to the side, visibly torn between his family and his loyalty to me. Officers, they're violating a restraining order, I said, pointing to my in-laws. They're trying to take over my home. The officers moved in, assessing the chaotic scene. One of them turned to me and asked, "Ma'am, do you have documentation for the restraining order?" I nodded, quickly going inside to retrieve the papers. As I handed them over, I glanced at Leaf. His face was filled with a mix of regret and worry, and I knew that this was a pivotal moment not just for me, but for our relationship. The officers began speaking with Leora, Zariel, and Dorian, who continued to protest, their voices filled with anger and defiance. Meanwhile, I stood to the side, my heart racing, my entire future hanging in the balance. After a tense exchange, one of the officers approached me. "Ma'am, we need to inform you that your restraining order is valid. Your in-laws cannot be on your property," he stated firmly. "We will ask them to leave, and if they refuse, we will take further action." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by the gravity of the situation. Leora, Zariel, and Dorian were not going to leave easily. They glared at me, their faces twisted with fury. As the officers escorted them off the property, Leora turned back, her voice filled with spite. "You haven't seen the last of us, Kaylin. This isn't over." I took a deep breath, standing my ground, refusing to let their threats shake me. Watching them leave, I realized that while this battle was far from over, I had finally taken control. I was no longer waiting for someone to save me, I was saving myself. Leaf stood off to the side, silent and conflicted, watching his family leave under police escort. For the first time, I felt like I truly understood the path ahead. I would have to fight for my peace, my home, and my future, even if it meant walking that path alone. As the officers escorted my in-laws off the property, I could see the anger boiling in their eyes, especially Leora's. She turned back, shouting, "This isn't over, Kaylin. You think you can just take everything from us? You'll regret this." A chill ran down my spine, but I refused to be intimidated. I held her gaze, unwavering. "You've already taken enough from me. This is my home, and you will not take it away." Finally, the officers managed to clear the area, and Leora, Zariel, and Dorian were forced to leave. As the dust settled, I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling a profound sense of victory wash over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a true sense of freedom. I had stood up for myself. I turned to Leaf, who was standing near the porch, his expression a mix of relief, regret, and confusion. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. "I can't believe this happened," he muttered. "I never thought my family would go this far." I stepped closer, searching his face. "Leaf, I need you to understand something. I fought for this home because it's mine. I can't keep living in fear of your family." "I know," he replied, his voice heavy with remorse. "I should have stood by you. I was just scared." "Scared of what? Your family's anger?" I asked, feeling the weight of our entire ordeal pressing on me. "They're the ones who chose to invade our lives and threaten our future. I deserve better than that." His expression softened, and he nodded. "I want to support you, Kaylin," he said quietly, "but I don't want to lose my family either." I looked him in the eyes, steady and determined. "Your family chose their path when they decided to attack me and threaten my home. You need to choose me now, Leaf." For a moment, he looked conflicted, but then his expression shifted. He took a deep breath and nodded, his resolve clear. "You're right. I can't let them control my life, or ours, anymore. I'm with you." Hearing those words was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I knew we had a long journey ahead, but for the first time, I felt we could rebuild if we were both committed to making it work. In the following weeks, I focused on restoring the mansion to its former glory. I hired contractors to repair the damage, and with each improvement, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Room by room, I transformed the house into a sanctuary, a symbol of my resilience and strength. Leaf and I began to reconnect as well, sharing dreams, planning for the future, and learning to set boundaries with his family. Through this process, I found strength in my independence, while Leaf learned to stand up for our life together. The day the renovations were finally complete, I stood in the living room, looking around at the beautiful, peaceful space we had created. It felt like a fresh start. I was no longer a victim of betrayal. I was a woman who had fought back, reclaimed her home, and rediscovered her identity. As I watched the sunset from the porch that evening, a deep sense of peace settled over me. I had transformed pain into strength, turned betrayal into empowerment, and rebuilt a life I could be proud of. This house, once a battleground, had become my sanctuary, a place that reflected my journey from darkness into light. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing that I had the power to shape my own destiny.